Gimmick or golden goose? Let's find out about the Mount Coast. Today we'll be reviewing the Mount Coast R1, their flagship shoe that started it all. Quickly covering some metrics of this shoe, the R1 weighs 8.5 ounces in a US men's size 9. It costs $160 and comes in at a 35mm stack height with an 8mm drop. Mount Coast is a brand built off of ultra mileage and ultra marathons, which means all of their shoes in their lineup currently are focused just around that. The R1 is their flagship shoe built for road races, specifically those upwards of 50 to 100 miles at a time. Mount Coast also offers other shoes like the H1, which is their hybrid shoe for both road and trail, T1 for just trail, S1, which is a softer version of the R1 that can absorb less miles, and it's also heavier and a little bit more dense, as well as the P1 for stability. So Sal, why the hell would you buy an ultra marathon shoe? Well, the logic behind that was, if I'm going to be base training for my first marathon ever, and I'm going to be building my aerobic base over the winter and into most of really the whole first half of 2026, wouldn't I want a shoe that's able to stay on feet for long hours, or something that can be used throughout the week to really just take up a bulk of my mileage? So my logic behind this shoe is, I want to buy a shoe that is renowned for its comfort, for its durability, and for its stability over long distances. I'm not personally looking to use this shoe for any races unless I somehow get entered or invited to some ultra race, which again, I know I'm not ready for it yet. But once my training ramps up, I really would look to buy the Mount Coast again, and you'll see why later in this review. Before I get into the specific likes and dislikes of the R1, I first want to do praise the company for really putting their nose on the grindstone with every single shoe they've been making. I really love Mount Coast, but I am going to glaze them because they are a company that really has put their best foot forward, no pun intended, for making a quality but also a purpose-based shoe. Every single one of their shoes are meant for something, and they are very specific and they are very efficient at what they do. I find that a lot of brands really over the past 5 years have started making so many different lines of shoes where, customers almost get confused and it's just based off of feeling, which is great to have options, but I feel like that took away from the actual purpose-based shoes besides like the very top end race shoe. So I think it's really amazing that a company like Mount Coast, who is very new on the market, has blown up, and rightfully so, for doing everything right thus far. So I think they really do deserve that major shout out and praise for the good work they've done thus far. And again, we have seen Mount Coast really become so successful, even if you're looking at just one of their shoes, because of the way they're building their brand. Not only have they had a massive social media campaign really building the community of ultra running, but they have also targeted from the very beginning the exact community that they are trying to foster. Nowadays, I believe we see any good and average trainer ranging anywhere between 130 to even up to like 180. That's obviously a fairly big range, and Mount Coast falls right in the middle. And I think it's a very fair price with the technology that they've actually put into this shoe. And we'll get into the nitty-gritty as we continue. For this next section, you're going to be seeing a video of the shoe on foot while I go through my likes and dislikes. One of my favorite parts about the shoe is that I can just slip it on without having to adjust the tongue or untie my shoes and then retie my laces. One of the biggest things they've featured even on their social media campaign is that the shoes offer a dual lacing system. The dual lacing system essentially allows the foot to be looser on the lower half versus the upper half. And that is really, really good because over time, when you're running so many miles, your feet can swell up. And that's why a lot of runners who are running ultra marathons for the first time, or even ultra marathoners who are seasoned and routine in the sport, will have to wear shoes that are size, let's say 10 in my case, and then like halfway through the race, they're going up to size 10.5 or 11. This shoe mitigates that problem, and it's a really unique feature that we haven't seen on a shoe in a long time. And while my feet aren't swelling after the mere 20 miles a week that I am running currently, I can really appreciate that attention to detail and the addition of technology without the extra cost and weight or dollar. Mount Coast has built a brand off of stories, highlighting their use of their products through extreme events like the Moab 240 or any other top-notch ultra race. And I think it really is genius marketing that has played a significant role for the push of runners to transcend the distance. My only dislike for these shoes is that they are very squeaky. I am very excited to incorporate these shoes into my weekly miles and into my aerobic base builds, where I am going to be running upwards of 40 miles per week and hopefully up to 50. On foot, the R1 has a very nice and wide toe box, again accommodating for the swelling of the foot. And according to Mountain Coast, they really do want to keep you upwards of a range between 6 and 13 minutes. While that is a wide range, you will be having faster paces at the very end or the very beginning of an ultra race, which is why the shoe is nice for that. But it's not meant to be your 5K race day shoe where you're upwards of, like, let's say a 5-minute pace. That is not what this shoe is for, and it's just another nod to them for really just making it clear what the purpose of the shoe is and how really you're going to get the best use out of it. Now, what has been my personal use with these shoes? I personally have upwards of 40 miles on these shoes already, and I've been using them for my longer sessions. Longer with air quotes around them, because my longer sessions right now are anywhere between 5 and 8 miles. And I have taken it both on slow days, easy days, and progressive days. This past weekend, in fact, I used this shoe and I used it on a 5-mile progressive run where I went from a 10:30 pace all the way down to a 7:30-minute pace. And it felt really, really solid all the way through, no matter what pace, no matter what terrain, because I went through trails, back roads, hills, and all. And it felt like a very stable, it felt like a very secure shoe, no matter what the pace was. Getting into the upper of this shoe, I really just want to emphasize how well made it is. It is a double layer mesh, so you have a little bit of that extra protection on the foot. Speaking of that mesh, with the protection aspect, you get a stiffer version of that mesh right around the toe box, as well as on the heel, to really just protect that foot when you are going to be running in an ultra race in this wilderness with most likely rocks and stuff like this. God forbid you were to stub your toe. It's that extra protection, let's say. That's just one example of it. Another nice aspect besides the lacing system that we already covered is just the overall breathability. You can maybe see holes, little holes. It's all making your foot a lot more breathable, even with the dual layer of mesh. And you will even see this into the insole, where you don't see any holes right at the back, but right around the midfoot, you are going to have holes to, again, allow for extra breathability and keep your foot cool when you're running for long distances. You have a nice thick heel, and again, it's very firm, it's very rigid to keep structure of the foot, to prevent any rubbing, and it just provides very good protection. Going into something like the tongue is very soft and it's gusseted. I have some paper in here to kind of hold structure to the shoe when I'm not wearing it. And like I said, it just holds up very, very well. These are getting a little bit dirty because I've been running them in the rain and, you know, trails and all that. And I'm very happy with the upper feel, because you can really make it as tight and loose as you want depending on the area of the foot, as we covered with that dual lacing system. Mountain Coast offers something called Outsole foam, which is basically a PIBA hybrid to really just get the max amount of comfort, energy return, and durability throughout your stride. I wouldn't say it's necessarily springy, let's say something like the Evo SL. I think it falls more in line with the shoe I've had, something like the Nike Infinity React. It's not the most springy shoe. It's not the most firm shoe. It really combines all these kind of different feelings depending on the terrain and the pace that you're running on. I would definitely say it leans a little bit more on the firm side than something soft or springy. But again, just a very stable, a very nice ride all the way through. You'll be able to identify something called their zero sag, and that is basically a stability insert that follows throughout this gray line on the foot, and it just adds that extra layer of stability, especially near the medial side of the foot. As far as the lifespan of this type of foam, there have been runners, and Mountain Coast has advertised it to last anywhere between 400 and 700 miles, and there are runners who have put over 900 to 1,000 miles on this shoe and still felt very comfortable. So the lifespan is definitely up there. It is definitely higher than most of your everyday trainers on the market. And that is why I picked this shoe, because if I'm going to have a running rotation, why not get something that is literally meant for the miles? And as I mentioned earlier, the bottom of the shoe features a synthetic CPU rubber. It's not like a real rubber that you might see on the R1R, which is the updated version of this shoe. So this is why the shoe is squeaky, as we mentioned earlier. However, I would say this shoe is fairly grippy, even in wetter conditions. I've ran in the rain with these shoes. I've ran after the rain or shortly, in between. And this shoe, I haven't had any slippage. But if you are someone who is concerned about slipping or this or that, I personally have not had any issue. But there is that upgraded option where they do come and they fix any extra issue with the outsole, which is, the only complaint I've heard of people is slightly lack of grip, especially if you're going into wetter conditions, and the fact that it makes so much noise indoors. And both of that is already fixed, which is beautiful. So overall, yeah, I would say this is not another Instagram gimmick or, one of those waste shoes. I think the shoe so far has done a really great job, both in my personal training and from what I've seen in the media for racing. This brand has done a very good job of holding up to their promises and really providing all this great technology in their shoe for such an affordable price and for such a long time. I think there's, a lot of, not to have an unk moment, but I think a lot of times when we think of things like that really last in our quality, we think of back in the day. And I think that's true. I think a lot of things, even our shoes nowadays, the midsoles fall flat after 100 miles. This is not a shoe that's doing that. The shoe really, really has good structure, and it really puts the pedal to the metal when it comes to logging miles and just kicking ass on the road. So I rate this an 8.5 out of 10. And I think for an everyday trainer, does it have that pop that you want or this or that? Like, no. But you don't need that in an everyday trainer. You don't need to have the blast of your life every single time you put on your shoes. I think really if you want to get a job done and you want to get it done over a course of months, the Mount Coast are the shoes that are going to do it. So I gotta say, I'm very happy with it. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed the visuals. And again, I think if you're looking for ultra running shoes, there are some other brands out there. But again, I think if you're gonna go out and buy a shoe that requires mileage, requires structure, requires, I think if you're gonna buy a shoe that demands so much of you, why not buy a shoe that supports you all the way through? And genuinely, I mean that. You're not gonna wanna buy a shoe that just feels good and does nothing after a few miles for the same price. It's not like the shoe's $200+. It really is a bang for your buck, in my opinion, especially with the longevity of it. So we are going to definitely be putting a lot of miles on these in the new year, and we'll drop 100, 200, 300, 400 mile reviews and really see how these hold up in everyday training. We'll see if I bite my tongue. And, I got to say, I don't think I will. So I really hope you enjoyed. Thank you for sticking by. And I hope you enjoyed the visuals of me actually running. Let me know if you have any comments, questions, concerns, and if you'd like to see anything improved in these types of videos. Peace.
You just have to endure.